So in 2 years, that mentor type environment I was in, which was all those different businesses, all these different industries that I suddenly went through, moaning about my $28 a week, actually was like this sort of fast path to, no, you can go and do a degree in business studies, and you can use technology to supplement what you're doing. And I suppose that's probably a precursor to my rest of my life, because obviously,
well, that was the mapping. And I always talk about people's mapping. Everybody's got a different map of how they get started. And at some point, it opens up. And then the opportunities open up. So that what you've gotten to here is that you got to that place where you got to taste all these different things. And then you just discover something about yourself, this inner genius. And then you're like, okay, boom, now I can go.
Yeah. And I mean, it didn't stop there. I was lucky to get a graduate trainee job straight from university. I passed with a 2.2, which is it's essentially it's probably the minimum scrape through degree level I could get. But for me, I don't look at that as a down thing. I look at that. I passed a degree. Yeah. I got a second class degree. Sort of, which, to be honest, got me in the door to a graduate trainee program for a computer manufacturer. And when we talk about mentors, sometimes they're not necessarily all sort of lollipops and patting on your back, right? Sometimes they can be the harshest critic, the hardest person. And I went to work for this Australian guy as a graduate trainee, and he was just the harshest person I've ever worked with, harder than nails. And I don't know what the fighting instinct in me was, just like, I'm not going to let this guy beat me.
Right.
I'm going to win. Right. And so
that drive.
At 21, I was fighting this to get this guy to realize that I was a good pick. I was the right person. And but what I later realized was the process that he was using was incredibly powerful for educating me on how to be a salesperson. What is the right things to do, how to deal with overcome objections, how to find value or perceive value in what you're talking about, and how to to plan and schedule that conversation with customers so that they realize the value and you win the deal. And so for that year, which was hell, at 21, thinking, why would I should just walk, Right. It wasn't until later life I went, wow, thank that guy. Even though I hate him with every ounce of my body, I was like, this guy is just unfair and mean and harsh.
I think it's so.
He actually made me what is really understand that part of my journey,
right,
of like being a good salesperson, understanding what to do. But it woke up my engineering side of me, and it woke up this sort of like almost want to get back to be the nerd.
Right.
And so actually, I started reading networking books and the next.
I want to save that story to the next episode, because I know it's coming up and I love that story. Real quick before we finish this episode, there's so much in what you said. There's so much power in what you just said, because when you're in it, you don't feel it.
Right.
But when you look back, you're like, I am so thankful. I'm so grateful for that. But when you're in it, like, this is hell. This is like, what am I doing? And so there's a lot of discomfort. And so I look back at my journey, and I look at some of the most, there's all these cliche sayings like, necessity is the mother of invention, and things like that. And when you're going through it, you don't understand them. But then afterwards, you're like, that's why that was there. Other things like that. Those hardships is what builds your character. It is what makes you understand what you're made out of. And so I think that what you touched on there was very, very powerful for the audience.
Yeah, you used your pain for purpose, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm not saying that you should go look for a harsh mentor that's going to make your life miserable.
Life will hand it to you.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
I mean, I think it's also important to understand that you probably it's important to understand that who is a mentor, because
we're opening up to the next one. That's perfect. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. No, I was flowing on what
so good.
Because a mentor to me, if I have a Rolodeck of mentors, right? Some of you might say, I don't really have a mentor. I've never had a mentor. Truthfully, they probably had 50. Right. They just didn't identify them as mentors.
Right.
I had people all through the room. When I made decisions, who did I go and ask? Who was the person I was going to ask?
And why?
Yeah. And also, why were they the person I was going to ask? I had to make some big decisions. In 1999, I got offered a position in LA. I'd never been out of England. I've never worked in America. Didn't even think it was an option. And suddenly they were saying, you have a unique, because of my path, I suddenly found that I was this weird sales guy who suddenly became an engineer, which is like a salary drop. So when I made that drop, I asked somebody, I said, am I crazy? And the guy was like, no, because that's your thing that you're passionate about. And so go do something you love. And maybe in 2 years you'll go, I made more money as a salesperson. I'll go back doing that. But guess what? You'll probably be a better salesperson.
Right.
So I did that, and then I became a world-class engineer. Yeah. And next thing you know, people in Los Angeles are saying, you need to come to America. Huh. And they offer me H-1B visas because nobody can do what I can do. So I come to America. But I had to move my entire family. I had to make a huge decision. So again, those mentors are not just choosing the right path educationally, choosing the right path from an employment perspective. It's also just sometimes it's like making sure you get that life balance. And I tell you right now, I've made huge mistakes on both the personal and the business side. I've had those bumps and ups and downs where you think it's going to be great and it's gone, no, this is going to be harder. But it's that Rolodeck of mentors, right, that I've had over the years, and I could probably name them all, that have either influenced me or were there for me to ask that question, say, hey, is this the right thing to do?
So one thing that, as you were talking about that, made me think about is, even though you have mentors, it doesn't mean that you're always doing everything mentors say, because mentors are giving you their map of what they think based on their experiences. I have run across people that are well-intended and are, give you the advice, and then I feel bad for not taking it, but I also know that I got to trust my gut. It's like, yes, I'm going to take that, and there's a lot of nuggets I'm going to take, but there's other things that I need to go do. And so, as you were talking about your mentor Rolodex and why I asked the person why was that the person I asked, and then why? I think that's an important thing that we may have not talked about in the show before, which is great that we're bringing this up, is as you pick mentors or as you're talking to people, also have that checklist in your head is, why am I asking this person? And is there someone else that also has another opinion? Building companies. Some people have done it this way and it works, but it may not be the best way for you. And I've seen that happen. And so it's interesting. I want you to tell the story that you and I were having dinner last time, and you were talking about you getting your first sales job for this company.
Yes,
and
yeah.
This is a good story.
I don't know. I mean, again, I don't know how unique it is that with dyslexia, obviously I don't have all the they're called ions, right? They're aeons, and they connect your left and right side of your brain. And this is important. So let me explain. Which means that I'm left and right brain in combat constantly. That means my artistic side and my mathematical side is in loggerheads, which is why I can flip between being an engineer and a stand-up comedian, right? It's because my brain is going, hey, say something funny at this point when nobody is expecting you to say something funny, which is great, by the way, in a business meeting when you suddenly just say a joke and they're all like, wait, is this appropriate? And then you realize that you're being affable and friendly and the customer actually says, I like him. I want him back. I want him to come and help us design this, fix this problem, chat. So it does work. But one of the things I realized very early on when I was about 18, 19 was that I could speed read without reading.
That's so cool.
Right?
A friend of mine has the same thing.
Yeah, it's a kind of a weird sort of thing to discover. And you say people find their genius at some point. I think that is it. You could show me a PowerPoint presentation right now, flick through it, and then I would present it back to you as if I knew every slide, which is kind of a weird sort of party trick.
Right.
But
it's a great one.
It's a great one, but I didn't know it existed in me.
Right.
But the first example is what I was telling you about, where I realized, and I thought, hang on a sec, have I got some sort of Copperfield magic thing in me?
Yeah. Tell Nella, she's dying to hear.
So I was just trying to, I was working in PC manufacturing. This market had boomed, so I was kind of at the back end of it. And I was like telling my boss, I was like, I've heard networking is the future, right? Hubs and switches, and this is a whole industry, and data centers are going to be, co-located, and you're going to need a network to, and everyone's going to be connected, and email and all sorts of stuff. And he's like, Neal, just keep selling the PCs, right? We'll sell,
He's talking about data networks.
Data networks, right? So PC connections, right? And so I applied for a job at a reseller that was not far from me. Well, it's probably about 2 hours from me, so I'd have to move. But they had a job opening for a business development salesperson, and so I thought they're not going to even give me an interview. And so I just thought I'll just apply mainly because I was angry because my boss was like, Neal, they used to have a joke about me. They used to say, I was called Topside. And the reason I was called Topside is because I could sell anything to customers. So I could sell a PC, a bunch of PCs, and a topside of beef. And they would just buy the beef. And I was like, that's not true. And then I remembered there are instances where I sold some food to a customer for no apparent reason. But I was like trying to sell networking, and they were like, we're not a networking company. So I applied for this job, and against my better judgment, I got the interview. But it was like 2 days. And I knew nothing about networking. I'd just taken a punt.
Didn't you have something with relationships and that going on? Or
No. What I did was I grabbed the Novell Network book, which is the currently that was the network, the software that was sold to most companies for networking, and I just consumed all the schematics on the way to the interview, and I got in the room, and the interview was like, okay, so this is kind of an entry sales job for networking and switching and routing. And at this point I didn't really know anything. And so I just regurgitated the schematic. Like, so a network is it's a combination of servers that basically, set up IP addressing, source, destination, and I won't bore you with it now. But it was all just me recalculating what I'd just seen literally 5 minutes earlier in a schematic. And he said, can you just wait there for a second? And he goes out, and I'm like, oh God, I've been caught.
What have I done now?
Yeah, this is it. I've caught. And then in comes the general manager of the company. He says, can you just tell me again what you just said? And I'm thinking, oh God, I don't know if I could repeat it, but I tried. And he goes, we have engineers that couldn't regurgitate what you just said. Like we've got people who are like trainee engineers, building and design, who don't talk like this. And you're going for our entry-level sales job. And I said, oh, yeah, okay. Well, I'll be honest with you. I just kind of read a lot in preparation for this meeting. I don't want you to get to think that I'm a qualified engineer who's trying to get a sales job. And he goes, no, you've got the job. I'm just trying to work out what we're going to do with you.
Where to put you.
Yeah. And they put me with a guy. And it's funny because you brought that story up because, again, the genius that I suddenly realized that I could take information very quickly in a pictorial format and articulate it as if I know what I'm talking about, which is kind of dangerous in the wrong hands, right? So that was very young, by the way. So I realized that I needed to know to do proper training. And
with great power comes great responsibility.
Well, then it drove me. It drove me to get engineering qualifications. I did networking qualifications. I became a fully certified pre-sales engineer. So I felt like I had to.
This was the true fake it till you make it thing.
Yeah, it was a fake it till you make it. It was like, just give me the trust in me and I will get there in the end, right? Mm-hmm. But the guy that they put me with was actually a former JCB driver on a construction site 4 years old earlier. And in 4 years, he became the global sales director of an IT company.
The detail I was remembering, something about a relationship, was something that didn't it come with a car?
Yeah,
because you were.
Yeah, no, I didn't even know that. So I literally, so he says you hired, and he turns to me and goes, yes, so you get, this is your salary. And I was like, wait, that's slightly larger than what I was thinking it was going to be. Because I was an internal salesperson for a computer manufacturer. I was sitting at a desk, just sitting there getting commissions. And he's like, okay, so this is your commission plan. This is you get a Rover 200, which by the way is a terrible car, but at the time I'd take a go-kart.
Yeah.
Okay, so I get a car.
Sorry,
what? So I got a car. And I was like, I remember ringing my girlfriend at the time.
That's what it was. I remember
saying, yeah, I got the job. I'm moving to Newbury. You don't have to come with me. I got a car. And she's like, what? So yeah,
Are you breaking up with me?
Yeah. Oh no, she moved with me. She became my wife.
Aww.
But we're divorced now. But
okay.
Anyway, that's another podcast. Another story. But yeah, no, I think it's a good example of taking risks.
Mm-hmm.
I think, which I see a lot of people are when they're on this sort of scale of either they're too risk averse or they just have this sort of no hold bars sort of like confidence, overconfidence.
Right.
And overconfidence can be
equally as dangerous.
Although some people will say if somebody's confident, they could be a good person to teach
Right.
because they're not held back by anxiety or restriction.
Right.
I've taught presentation skills to people with anxiety. It's one of the classes that I've created, and I've done it for schools across the US and the UK. And it's really about, don't worry about ums and ahs.
Right.
You don't need to conform to this. Right. But the overconfident person probably doesn't even care anyway.
Right.
There's a couple of things that I want to threads that I want to pull on. Just things that I've learned on that is, from a personality perspective, not being held back. And so there's, in certain cases, certain individuals that are painting the world as they see it.
Right.
And so it comes across as overconfident, but they get a lot done because Steve Jobs was this person, right? He saw, I just finished his autobiography, and there's like, he lived in his own world and the world conformed to him. So there's that. And then there's also recognizing your limitations and all that.
I think I would disagree. Sorry to interrupt, but I'd say that's a belief,
right,
versus confidence.
Got it.
Overconfidence tends to be, sometimes comes from a place of lack of knowledge.
Insecurity.
Okay.
Yeah. No, I mean, sort of just going into something, not fully understanding it and just saying, I'll just do this. Whereas belief is, I believe I can do this. I believe I can succeed at this. And I think that instilling in what Steve Jobs did was very, very certain about what he believed was the right thing to do.
He got others to do it, and it just became true.
Yeah. And also, 9 out of the ideas failed. The one that succeeded was super successful and made the world bend to his environment. So, I think it's very important for students to really understand that you have to fail to achieve success, right?
Well, the belief thing is really important too, because, and I'm glad that you articulated it that way, because that goes to the second point I was going to make. When people are taking risks, I find it, having a background in wealth management and understanding all kinds of risks that there's involved and investing and all kinds of stuff, there is risk of things that you are out of your control. Like, I believe I did the research. This is the thing. You're taking a risk based on somebody else.
Yeah.
And then there's a different risk on betting on yourself. And know thyself, know thy genius, know how hard of a worker you are, and then believe in yourself. And then the risk minimizes once you're like, like what you were talking about with this individual that was training you up, and you're like, I'm going to prove this. Like, there's some drive there.
There's a drive there.
There's going to overcome that risk.
It's the plot of Office Space, isn't it? It's the idea that while he was all tightly screwed up and stuff, he was failing. The minute they let him go, and he was like, I don't fear the Reaper. I don't care. I'm just the vision of the business looking at him going, this is a really good person. We need to keep this person. Even though he was like hoping they would just fire him. And he ended up getting promoted. I don't necessarily sort of say that's going to happen every time you just go crazy and start cutting a fish on your desk on a Tuesday afternoon, right?
No, but I like the thread in all of this, and tying it back to mentorship, is a good mentor helps you find that belief in yourself. And then your world opens up.
I think you do need to have a group of advisors. We probably all do it in our friend groups. Like, who in our friend group do we go to when it's, we're frustrated about relationships, or we're trying to work out what to do, where to go, what holiday to go to, even just sort of some of the normal life stuff that you do, you have a bunch of people that you would go to. And I think finding people who kind of you want them to be your mentor is a really good sort of strategy, because it essentially means that you're always assessing people in your cachet of relationships. It's like, who, that person. And do you know what? One of the best things you'll ever receive is a phone call from somebody who says, could you help me? Or would you be my mentor? So
that's what my grandmother used to always say. If you want to find a friend find someone you can help.
Yeah.
And that is a beautiful way to look at the world as well.